Welcome to Crash Concepts, where the economy, energy, and the environment are explored. Up next, fresh ideas and insights into the factors that are driving the world and shaping your future. Presenting information you can't afford to live without, here's Chris Martenson.
Welcome to this Peak Prosperity Podcast. I am your host, Chris Martenson, and today we have the pleasure of having Joel Salatin back on the show, one of the most visible and influential leaders in the organic food and sustainable farming movement. A couple of areas we've been covering in depth lately at the site. His family owns and manages Polyface Farms, which has been featured prominently in such modern food movement masterworks as the book The Omnivore's Dilemma by Michael Pollan and the documentary film Food Inc. A little bit of a bummer, but a very important movie there as well. Joel is America's resident farmer, philosopher, provocateur. Polyface Farms is family-owned, it's multi-generational, it's pasture-based, it's beyond organic, it's a local market farm and informational outreach center in Virginia's Shenandoah Valley, and they say they are in the redemption business, healing the land, healing the food, healing the economy, and healing the culture, another topic that's really been near and dear to our conversations at Peak Prosperity lately. Well, that's why we love them, and that's why we're having Joel back on the show. Joel, welcome back.
Thank you, Chris. It's wonderful to be with you. It's really an honor.
Oh, well, thank you, and thanks for your time today. So, as I mentioned, Joel, we've been covering a lot of farming and related ecological issues at our site this year, ranging from soil health to bees and other pollinators. And I want to get your views on the state of world on these matters, but let's start with the food we eat. I'm on this new eating regime. Some might say it's a new age fad diet. Mostly involves meat and vegetables. And so now when I walk into what I used to think of as a grocery store or a supermarket, I notice that all of the middle aisles in the store, they don't have any food in them. They're off limits to me and nothing I can eat. So what little food I can find in these supermarkets, it's all located on the outer rim. So here's the question. Have I just fallen for some hippie weirdness, or do you think I'm onto something?
Well, I think you're onto something. In fact, I think you're just getting there. And I would encourage you. The next step is just forget the supermarket. One of the neatest thing that's happening right now. I've been in this for decades, and one of the neatest things that's possible now is that you can actually find a lot of what I call integrity food opportunities in locales that were not available 20 years ago, even 10 years ago. And so one of the most probably the most exciting things that's happening right now in the local food movement is what I call electronic aggregation. What's happening is, and this gets a little bit maybe futuristic, but I want you to think that the supermarket as we know it is only supposedly the first one came in 1946, and since that time, of course, it has taken over more and more of the food purchasing thing. But it has built up around it a tremendous amount of impediments to integrity food, hurdles, and a bureaucracy. As a local farmer, if you want to get into a Walmart or whatever, you just can't. I had a bunch of executives from a big supermarket chain here, and they said, "How can we get your food in?" I said, "Well, the first thing you need to do is let something smaller than a tractor trailer back up to your dock." End of discussion. They couldn't even fathom a food system in which you would transport anything smaller than a tractor trailer, and so one of the things that's happening in the whole internet and electronic age here as we move into this at warp speed is that we're starting to see. In fact, some futurists are predicting the demise, the obsolescence of the supermarket as we know it. We know Amazon is trying to figure out how to deliver stuff with drones, and so what we're seeing is, as the cost of virtual supermarkets, electronic buying, as the cost of that drops where even small companies and small outfits, individuals can glom on, can use the software. We're seeing now more the proliferation of what I call electronic aggregation, where 30 farms, 40 farms, 50 farms in a region can get all their products onto one shopping cart site, and people can order online local products, go visit the farms, vet the farms themselves in a little bit of recreational investment, and then become really loyal customers and literally shop online, but from local integrity producers. And the beauty of it for integrity producers like us is that we don't have to go to farmers market, we don't have to go peddling, we don't have to pick up the phone and do a bunch of marketing. We can do what we do best, which is farming. Somebody else, some computer geeks that really get, high quality food and integrity, they can manage this cool, shopping cart site and handle the logistics of that. And the customer can shop in their jammies at 2:00 in the morning and have the groceries show up on their doorstep. They don't even have to sit at a stoplight waiting to make a left-hand turn and find a place in the parking lot and not get hit by cars backing in and pulling out. And so this whole localization, or this small scale co-opting of this global internet shopping cart technology is I think a really, really bright light of availability and affordability to link up the integrity food producers in a locale and the integrity food consumers in a locale, so that we can just essentially make an end run around the supermarket.
I love this idea. I do all of my shopping in my jammies now. So A, that's a win. But B, I'm smelling an opportunity here. So is this widespread, or are there a couple places that you could point to that people could say, see how it works?
Right. It's in its infancy. But the bugs are being worked out. The one that I'm most familiar with is one that we collaborate with here in Virginia called Relay Foods. These guys are sharp. In fact, this company is the third iteration here locally. It started with a little local startup, and then it got bought by a bigger outfit, and then Relay Foods bought that outfit. So this is the third iteration of the idea, and I think they're getting like 3,000 chickens and 600 turkeys from us this year, and they collaborate with a whole lot of farms. Now, obviously, supermarkets are very unhappy about this. They don't like this, and including even organic type markets are very upset about this. But the fact is that a consumer friendly, licensed Main Street facade that's a bricks and mortar retail interface is an expensive meeting place. And bricks and mortar, as you know, Kevin Kelly, the editor of Wired magazine, wrote a book, New Rules for the New Economy, several years ago. And one of the things he talks about there is that the mass of everything is going down. The physical weight, the bricks and mortar weight of everything is dropping as everything becomes more information dense in cyberspace. And so the muscle car of the 60s has been replaced by a car that has microchip computers in its brake calipers. The 120-pound secretary has been replaced by a 4-ounce mail router. We've gone from mass and physical presence and physical size to the web, to stuff that doesn't weigh anything. Data on the internet doesn't weigh anything, and the fact is that from a retail marketing standpoint, the maintenance of this, the air conditioning, the heat, the the bathrooms and the OSHA approved, the handicapped approved parking and access and fluorescent lighting and all the things necessary to pull off a pleasant, a customer friendly retail interface. All of that adds a tremendous amount of overhead to what can be simply a box of groceries that shows up on your doorstep, which can be inventoried and warehoused on farms that don't have to maintain fluorescent lighting and handicapped access. And I'm not trying to pick on handicap. I'm just trying to help everybody to understand that the cost of that physical, licensable, customer-friendly interface is way, way more expensive than maintaining a non-public warehouse on a farm or in a consortium of farms that then can be cherry-picked out when the orders come in and customized for home delivery. Relay Foods actually had MIT do a carbon footprint distribution analysis of what they were doing, and it was actually a smaller distribution carbon footprint than the supermarket. One of the big challenges in the local food system so far has been everybody, it's warm and fuzzy and it's kind of neat and all that, but we haven't been able to crack the distribution efficiency simply because on the local food system, we're tooling stuff around, 3 bushels of stuff in a trunk of a car, to the farmer's market. And even though we're only driving, 30 or 40 miles, Jolly Green Giant is taking 45,000 pounds of stuff. Yes, it's taken it 1,500 miles, but when you prorate the carbon distribution footprint, the cost of that transportation, it's way, way cheaper in the tractor trailer going 1,500 miles than it is in the trunk going to farmer's market. And this has been an Achilles heel, a bugaboo in the credibility and the viability of the local food system. And so now we're actually getting the software and the technology. There are numerous ones of these now around the country that are springing up. Of course, some of them are going out of business because, like any startup, they're high risk. But there are more and more of them coming up, and the bugs of the software are being worked out, customized, and suddenly now we can inventory extremely cheaply, offer complete customization to the customer, like you said, shopping in your jammies, and a very, very competitive price now, because we've been able to electronically aggregate rather than physically aggregate. It's very, very cool.
I love that because it obviously it seems a bit off the mark to grow high integrity foods, but then have a low integrity distribution system. So to marry those up and get the integrity throughout that chain sounds great. Now, one of the things that I love about being involved with my local farmers or local farm markets, though, is the opportunity for the interaction. Would you find this system, is this going to reduce interaction, or does this actually in some way allow more people to connect with farms in other ways, or how would you judge that part?
Well, that's always you're certainly hitting your finger right on the nub of the first negative reaction when a person hears this, and I would say that it's kind of a wash. I recognize that electronics can't give you a hug and a wink of an eye. I absolutely understand this. However, those of us that are participating in this, we run an on-farm, our own farm shopping cart. We're now selling 45% of our stuff through this to 6,000 families who could never come to a single site, and we couldn't possibly staff a single site. A physical presence. But the beauty of this is we can send a delivery truck right into a community with pre-orders, and it's extremely efficient for the delivery system and for us as a farmer. And so what we do is we send out newsletters, we run contests, we do recipes. I mean, we can do all sorts of social media, Facebook, pictures of the farm, and we can do a lot of things, including encouraging our folks to come to the farm. Now, we don't deliver more than 4 hours from the farm. So one of the reasons for that is so that any of our folks can come to the farm for a visit and get back in a day. Our delivery driver doesn't have to spend any nights on the road. There's so a 4 hour radius of the farm, but in a lot of the U.S., 4 hours gets you to a metropolitan area in almost everywhere. So we have boundaries and we have protocols in place to maintain that kind of thing. And the fact is that how many people who shop at a farmer's market have ever actually physically gone and visited the farm? I mean, you're just assuming that guy that has the big smile, is what he says he is. And sometimes they are, and sometimes they're not. And so we feel like it's kind of a wash on the personal level thing, but it's not a wash when it comes to the efficiency and the logistical efficiency and the cost of actually making that transaction happen. I mean, another cool thing about this is I don't have to sit there at a vendor stand waiting for John and Mary to sit there and hem-haw about whether they want this kind of tomato, that kind of tomato, or whether they want, the chicken breast or the porterhouse steak or the ground beef or the pork chop for their guests that are coming next Thursday night. I'm sitting there, going from one leg to another. Come on, please make up your decision. And I've got, 15 minutes going on this transaction. Instead, all that hemming and hawing and conversation between Paul and Mary, whatever their name was, can occur, in the bedroom, or around the living room table, the dining room table at home, and then they can press click buy, and it goes in their shopping cart. And I'm sitting at home, reading a book or snoozing or doing a podcast while these people are out here ordering. It doesn't take any of my time. So there's a lot to I think a lot to this electronic aggregation idea, and I just think that this is that we're seeing with the whole Amazon and the whole e-marketing thing. I'm almost 60, so I'm not of the generation of e-marketing at all. But the other day I needed a new briefcase. I've traveled all over the world and the thing's falling apart. It's a really good one. I bought it at Staples years and years ago, and it's getting pretty threadbare. So, of course, I go back to Staples. Well, guess what? They don't have that style anymore. So Teresa and I come home, and even as Luddite as I am, she helps me, get on the internet. Well, she actually does. I just look over her shoulder, And it's always good to marry a wife smarter than you are. Mm-hmm. And so she pulls this stuff up. We look at every briefcase available in the world, find the exact one we want at Macy's, click buy, send a credit card number, and 3 days later it shows up FedEx on our front doorstep. We didn't have to get in the car and drive anywhere. I mean, this is very cool, and you can you say what you want to, but I think that this is a place where we're going to see some real competition to the physical, to the supermarket, to the physical interface. And it's going to create accountability there. Because the fact is the supermarkets have circled the wagons to make sure that people like us stay out, whether it's SKU numbers, slotting fees, insurance, $3 million worth of insurance requirements. Then the insurance company, they don't know anything about farming, so they go to the Virginia Tech and Cornell and Penn State and Kansas State, all the land grant colleges, and say, well, what is a low risk farm? Well, guess what? A low risk farm is one that uses a lot of pharmaceuticals, medications, locks everything up in a factory so it never encounters a mallard duck, and and uses good sterile petroleum-based chemical fertilizer, not living weird things like compost. Wow, there's stuff. I mean, they're having sex in that pile. We can't have that on a farm. And so And so the whole system. This is not just government. It's just the entire orthodoxy system. Circles the wagons and does a lot of things to make sure innovation can't darken their doors. And so those of us who have the answers to avian influenza and have the answers to salmonella and mad cow disease and whatever, those of us who have innovated the cures, the antidotes for all these maladies that are making people paranoid today, we can't poke through that circle of wagons that the supermarket system has erected. So I say, we'll make our own system. We'll make an end run around. We now have the ability to do it. Who needs them? Let's just make an end run around them.
I love this idea of farming and a disruptive technology. And of course, technology allows us to do these really complex things. And I'm convinced technology someday will be the first person, quote unquote, that I see when I go into the doctor's office, because computers turn out to be able to hold a lot more information and process it more elegantly than humans can often. And when it comes to logistics, slam dunk, right? And so yeah. I'm one of these guys. I mean, I love, finding something exactly what I want on Amazon. I click the button, and 2 days later, the big brown truck of Happy News rolls up my driveway, leaves it there for me, right? But there's a piece in here that I love, which is I can't go into a store and buy stuff anymore because I trust the reviews. Right, I'm really into the reviews, so I'm thinking there's this other role in this place where, if you can connect with the people and the people can be leaving reviews, and then I know of all these possible local farms I could buy stuff from, kind of spotty reviews for that one, but these guys are doing it right. It provides, I think, more accountability and the ability to reward even more minutely, I think, the people who are maybe doing a slightly better job. Because for me, I put a huge premium on soil health. So if I know somebody's doing really high quality, no-till soil and they leave space for pollinators, and that's part of what they do, I will pay more or preferentially buy their stuff whenever I could. Yes.
And the beauty of what I'm describing has a really short accountability chain. I mean, shoot, we from time to time over the years, we've had extra eggs in the spring or whatever, and I call up the local supermarket, and my goodness, I mean, you can't even talk to a person. I mean, the level of fraternization, what I call the fraternity of ideas within that whole industrial complex, the level of it is just profound. And people who haven't tried to poke through that, I think often don't appreciate what it is. I mean, I get asked all the time, why can't I get your stuff down at Kroger's? Why can't I get your stuff down at Trader Joe's or whatever? And the fact is that that these big entities have erected all sorts of fraternal arrangements, whether they're price concessions or distribution concessions or kickbacks and insurance things and all sorts of things, and just make it very, very difficult for true innovators to be able to access it. I mean, anybody that's worked in a big business knows how they become fairly bureaucratic and difficult to get new ideas in.
Yeah,
I mean, look at the malleability. I mean, this podcast, what you have done with Peak Prosperity. I mean, can you imagine trying to get this on CNN? I mean, that's a perfect example of what I'm describing, and we've seen it. We've seen it now. The entire alternative media, and we've watched TV. TV is dropping like a rock. I mean, the top-rated shows now have only a fourth of the audience of the top-rated shows of the 1960s. Why? Because of things like Peak Prosperity. You can with some a little bit of mental acuity and a little bit of technology, you can sit down in your home and launch a complete alternative media thing. And okay, so you don't have 5 million views, but you have 1 million, and somebody else has 500,000, somebody else has 100,000, and you add all those up, and suddenly you have this extremely fertile germination tray of innovative ideas, innovative things, who would never see the light of day on MSNBC, ABC, any of the great big dinosaurs. They're screening, the sieve that those big outfits use to make sure that the kind of information you're putting out doesn't get on those shows. They don't hate you. They don't hate me. They just don't play golf with us.
Well, and it's more than that. I don't have a single advertiser that I'm beholden to, and
right,
and
exactly,
and so,
exactly.
That's just part of the game for them. I understand that. Yeah.
Right, and so maybe that's a good kind of analogy to explain what's happening. People that are, for example, frustrated at why is it that this tidbit of news that I got that I think is just earth-shattering, it never gets on ABC News. Well, it's the same issue with why can't good raw milk or compost-grown tomatoes get in my supermarket? Well, it's the same. It's the same issues.
Mm-hmm. It absolutely is, and sort of on that tack, but switching over to the government side. Recently I just wrote a pretty extensive report. It hurt my heart to write it on the loss of bees and other pollinators and the emergence of the neonicotinoid class of pesticides and how these two things really overlap very, very nicely in terms of time, dose response, all of that. And maybe I shouldn't call the neonics pesticides. I'm going to call them biocides because they seem to take out a pretty broad swath of life out there. And in doing this, there's reams of solid, compelling dose response data saying that these class of pesticides, they're just flat out nasty. They're stone cold killers, right? And the EPA recently, after 4 years, has decided that what they need to do next is study the issue for another 3 years. That's it. They put a moratorium on new uses, but as long as a prior use was using it on corn, have at it, right? And because of this response and others by the USDA, raw milk, all that stuff, the FDA, EPA, I've kind of lost faith in the government as fair or responsible protectors or arbiters of anything besides protecting corporate profits. In your experience, is that an unfair view? Am I painting too broadly with that brush?
No, remember, you're talking to the guy that wrote the book "Everything I Want to Do Is Illegal," and I mean, the story of our farm and our life is a story of battles with regulators, bureaucracy, from zoning to food safety to whatever. There is an orthodoxy. I mean, let's look at food, for example. I mean, the track record of the government, of the official government orthodoxy is not good. I mean, this orthodoxy told us in the 1950s, my goodness, we're supposed to powder your children's hair with DDT. You got pictures of DDT being, blown around your house with these little rosy-cheeked children, right next to the, then they told us we shouldn't eat butter or lard. We should eat, vegetable shortening, Crisco. Yeah, I remember growing up with Crisco, and you're supposed to eat this hydrogenated vegetable oils. And then they told us, nursing babies is barbaric and Neanderthal. Women, you need to liberate yourselves and get out here, get some Enfamil and some Similac, and get out here in the workplace. And I know I'm going where angels fear to tread here, but get rid of this old, Neanderthal barbaric stuff. And then we saw, and so this was official government policy to push infant formula and things like that, and we raised a generation of asthmatics, Enfamil sufferers. We had feedlot, stilbestrol and crazy drugs women were taking for to reduce pregnancy, whatever, and then there were these ramifications, even multi-generational ramifications, and then we were told to that we need to feed our cows dead cows in order to raise them cheaper, and so let's grind up these dead cows, feed them back to cows, and then we can grow them faster, fatter, bigger, cheaper. And then, of course, that gave us bovine spongiform encephalopathy, known as mad cow. And now we've got, genetically modified organisms. This is the answer to the future. And so Roundup herbicide, and these herbicides, like Roundup Ready, glyphosate, that's what I'm looking for. Glyphosate, that their use is quadrupled in 15 years since GMOs came out. And these are, what these things do, the way they work, is they completely scramble the nervous system of plants. Well, does it make any sense that something that scrambles the nervous system of plants might scramble the nervous system of humans? And so suddenly in the exact same 15-year period, we've seen an exponential increase from 1 in 10,000 to 1 in 70 autism in children. I mean, it's an absolute, it's off the charts. Anyway.
Oh yeah, and
enough ranting. What I'm suggesting is I haven't even hit pasteurized milk or whatever, but what I'm suggesting is that the track record, this, as you said, the officialdom, the government official speak, is a dismal track record, and yet Americans today, we continue to vote in people who expand and increase the role, the market intervention, and the quote unquote what's the word? Not safety, but the safety net. This whole protection from the government. And I'm looking at this track record and saying it's a train wreck. Why would anyone who's thinking in their right mind? Why would anyone give those officials, those kind of people who have touted this forever, why would anybody entrust them with the safety of our food? It's crazy.
It is, and we got the food pyramid, which turns out to have been just wrong, and all sorts of other things. And the interesting part is that good scientists and people who were careful and considerate knew how wrong it was decades ago, and but it got entrenched. And so once something's in a bureaucratic framework, it takes a while to undo it. And I'm sure you saw this recent piece of news. My family, we buy a lot of organic food, and we do that for a variety of reasons. Right up at the top of our own list are our own and ecological health. But recently, the USDA comes out with this report, and they say, organic food is unsustainable because the yields per acre are 30, 40, maybe 50% lower than conventional farming. So we can't even go there because we wouldn't be able to feed the world. They said, and worse, they measured the health benefits from organic and said they couldn't find any. Did you see that report?
Oh, well, I've been watching them all my life. I've seen these reports over and over again. Let me give you an example of how these studies are done, because remember, this is a fraternity. I'll give you one that was done at Virginia Tech, back 30 years ago when organics was first just making a little bit of buzz in the farming community. So they took a bunch of test plots. Land grants have all these test plots out in the field. They test all sorts of things. And so these test plots, back in the early 70s, they'd been for 25 years testing, pesticides, herbicides, chemical fertilizers, all the darlings of the post-World War II, industrial complex. And let's try this organics, and so they separated out about 3 of them, and they planted corn in there, hybrid corn, and then they took 3 plots next door, and they dumped all the concoctions of chemicals and fertilizer and everything on it. And of course, and the organic plot they didn't do anything to. It's just it's going to be organic, And so of course the 6 plots grew, and the 3 plots looked wonderful, and the other 3 plots were weedy and junky and not very productive. And so they measured the corn off of each one, and of course the one produced a whole bunch of corn, and the other one had a couple little anemic ears, And so the official report came out. Mason Carball was our Commissioner of Agriculture at the time, and I still remember reading it like yesterday, and his official pronouncement was if we went to organics, we'd have to pick which half of the world to kill because we couldn't produce enough food based on this study. Now, anyone that knows anything about the soil knows that that is an incredibly prejudicial, skewed study, because if you were going to do a true measure, you would have picked plots that hadn't had any chemicals dumped on them for several years, and not only that, but had been built up with compost and carbon and wood chips and developed this deep, humus bed before you tried it, and maybe you'd even use some open pollinated corn instead of hybrid. But the point is that you would have done some long-term remediation to that ground before you did a head-to-head test. But see the science. This is where scientists go ballistic. When I say science is not objective, the problem is it's not, because the studies are put together by people who have a preconceived notion. They have a worldview that doesn't allow them to be honest in their studies. So this is the typical kind of study that's done, and then it's splashed all over the New York Times as officialdom, information, and it could be no further from the truth if you just concocted a wild story in fantasy land. You could not concoct a more incorrect story, and yet this is purported as science, actual fact. It enters the officialdom. The same thing permeated the UN Long Shadow report. Basically, whatever the official report is, this is what I tell people. I say, listen, whatever the official government report is, it's probably, the truth is probably opposite. Whatever they say. If there's weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, there probably aren't. If they say there's nothing to worry about over here, there probably is something to worry about. Whatever the official pronouncement is, you believe the opposite, and you'll probably be right.
You remind me of that Lily Tomlin quote, which is, "As cynical as I am, I find I can't keep up." Because it's an outrage du jour, isn't it? But this is part of the waking up process. And what I've been noticing is that more people, it's not just their own health with organic food. They're saying, if I know I'm buying organic, at least I know I am not part of putting these neonic pesticides into the environment. And that's important to me, right? Because my health is more than simply just the sum of what I put in my body. That's important. But maybe it's also important to me, my relationship with the rest of the world, and that bees and butterflies and other things, midges and gnats and things I don't track and can't quantify. But those are important too, that in fact there's this whole natural world that developed over billions of years. It has an intelligence, it has a design, it's doing something. And that maybe having the lightest footprint, or at least the footprint that we know matches most closely with the DNA blueprint that we were born with and other things we're born with, that maybe there's some wisdom in that. And I find more people turning to that, understanding that there's a lot of BS coming out of the so-called defenders of the status quo. But in my mind, you're right. The government agencies have lost just a ton of legitimacy. And my first instinct now is to disbelieve anything they say and then have it be proven true. I'm a guilty until proven innocent when it comes to government pronouncements at this point, because it's just, that whole fool me once, shame on me. But, after the 100th time, I mean, it's just beyond, I just can't.
Yeah. And, and absolutely. And this is certainly what's fueling the entire, libertarian, anti-government. I mean, do we really think that we would have better education if we doubled the bureaucracy and the money poured to public education? Do you really think it would be better? Many people like me don't think so. Would we really have better food if we doubled farm subsidies or created more crop insurance? That's the new buzzword term. There's just every time a new the official idea comes up, it's crazy. It's crazier than the one before it. But this is what's fueling, I think, some of this backlash now, where we actually have some some kind of, big names that are actually saying things like, maybe we need to go to a flat tax. Maybe we need to go to complete school choice. A voucher system, an ESA, an educational, what's it called, an educational savings account, where every child the day they're born, gets an account, and that can be spent wherever they want to for their education. And I mean, there are some really, really creative things coming out of this, and including a different way to administer food stamps or all those kinds of things. And I mean, I tend to be fairly libertarian, but what I am saying is that I think you are riding a wave of frustration with officialdom, and we see it in our food. How many people really trust Monsanto? How many people really trust Tyson Foods now? The whole avian influenza outbreak. Eggs are going to supposedly go to $4 a dozen. We've killed 38 million chickens. Has anybody anywhere heard any official say, maybe we shouldn't put 100,000 chickens 3 tiers high in battery cages where each chicken has less than the size of a piece of notebook paper to live out their entire existence? Maybe that's not a good, maybe that actually, do you reckon that could make them more susceptible to avian influenza? Back in 2004 when it went through the Far East over in Vietnam and Laos, Cambodia, it came up toward Europe. Great Britain did a study, and they found out that if a chicken gets 2 fresh blades of grass a day, they're immune to high-path avian influenza. Now, would anybody dare to suggest that these 38 million chickens that we've now killed and exterminated? I mean, 38 million chickens. I figured up how many tractor-trailer loads that is. I mean, it's like 5,000 tractor-trailer loads. Okay, I mean, this is just massive, and this is the system that's supposed to be efficient, that's supposed to feed the world. Don't you think that if this really were that if the weakness of the system were really in backyard flocks, don't you think they'd be finding it? No. I mean, when we had it here in Virginia a decade ago, they trapped waterfowl. They went to backyard flocks. They went to outdoor flocks. They did everything trying to find that, the smoking gun. We're going to find this. Where did this hit the industry? It came from these, these malcontents, these heretics, these weirdos out here, and they couldn't find one. They were desperate to find one. They couldn't find one. And I had two of the federal vets that were involved with the extermination program come visit the farm. They were from around the country. They'd heard about it. They said, while we're here, we'll come visit the farm. And so they came out. Each one of them independently sat in my front room and said, every one of us on the Federal Vet Task Force, every one of us knows that this is because there are too many chickens in too close confinement, both in the house and in geographic locations. There's just too many chickens concentrated in a single geographic location. But if any of us breathed that to the media tomorrow, we'd be fired within 24 hours. Mm-hmm. So there's your science. There's your science. That, was it Teddy Roosevelt who is said to have said, it's hard to get a guy to believe something when his paycheck depends on believing something else?
That was Upton Sinclair. That was awesome.
Upton Sinclair. Okay,
yeah.
In the jungle. All right, or maybe it wasn't in the jungle, but it's Upton Sinclair. Yeah, and I think that's where we've come. Whether it's the what gets into the supermarket, what gets into the official media, gets the government report. I mean, name your big entity, and there's such a protective circle the wagons mystique around these big status quo institutions that you literally cannot believe anything that they say.
You're pretty far down in the cycle of the story when truth becomes a radical act. That's It's not a good sign, but it sometimes means you're close to the beginning of the end, so you can start over again. But my frustration, which you named, is there. It's palpable, and it's frustration because we're doing so many things that just lack common sense. And I'm a common sense kind of guy, so I'm watching us just do what I consider to be dumb stuff. Like here's an example. I look out my window, and we've got a local family farm there. They've been farming for generations, but they do it agriculture, industrial ag style, right? So 3 weeks ago, they sprayed Roundup on their winter rye because I guess they're going to do that kind of no-till farming, right? Air quotes,
right?
That kind of no-till. And then
plant GMO.
Yeah, and then they waited for it to go white. It doesn't even turn brown. It becomes bleached, right? Then a week ago they plowed that under, and I'm just like, oh my God, and I look at plowed soil and I think wounded soil, and it just lacks common sense. It might make economic sense. I'm sure they know what they're doing economically, I guess, but from every other standpoint, I'm offended by what they do because it's out of a relationship, it's out of integrity, it's obviously not sustainable, but it's very widely accepted, and that's where my frustration comes from because I see us doing things as a nation that lack that common sense, right? They seem amoral in some cases. In some cases, I'll go further and say immoral because it's all about the money.
Yeah, well, it's all about the money. It's also about peer dependency. It's about what I call the fraternity. I never use the word conspiracy because if you use the word conspiracy, then you're just a nutcase and you're dismissed. But I like the word fraternity of ideas or orthodoxy because just imagine 600 years ago if you'd walked around saying, "Hey guys, did you know the Earth is round?" You'd have been branded a heretic. What? Of course, the Earth is flat. It's you can see it out there, and you're going to fall off the edge. Blah blah blah. We all knew, and every single kind of historical context has its orthodoxy, and we're no less. We as a in our context, in our current American civilization, we are no less immune to the same kind of silly, unreasonable, your word, orthodoxy, as any prior people, whether it was slavery is good, or women don't want to vote, or name your orthodoxy. Every context, every time is subject, and I sit around and I wonder sometimes when exactly as you described the silliness of some of this. What 100 years from now are people going to look back at our time and say, man, those guys were nuts, to think so and so, to think that nutritious food was equivalent to sterile food. Yeah. I mean, we have this orthodoxy right now in our country that sterile food is safe food, and if it's not sterile, it's not safe. Well, and that's how we've gotten to where Coca-Cola and Mountain Dew are safe, but raw milk is not, because it's got little living, bugs running around in it. And so we've got this fixation on sterile as opposed to safe. Well, we all know that we're not sterile, and we've got 3 trillion bacteria inside of us. I mean, we are extremely unsterile, and those bacteria inside of us are close cousins to the billions of fungi, nematodes, actinomycetes, bacteria in the soil. Grandma used to say every kid needs to eat a pound of dirt by the time they're 12. I tend to agree with that. And I've often thought, when you pull a carrot out of the garden and you kind of wipe it on your pants and you eat it, you got a little bit of dirt left on it. And I can just see all those microbes. They come down to your stomach microbes and, oh, long lost cousin, and they're all having this great family reunion down there. But you're right. There is this, the more we know now about the intricacies, the collaborative symbioses and complex relationships in the ecosystem, we're realizing, wow, we don't know anything. I mean, take the Human Genome Project. I mean, that was a wonderful example of this. All of the scientists that that set it up. It's going to take us 3 years to map it because we know there's 100,000 pairs. That's the statistical, mathematical requirement to have the genetic diversity that we have. We know there's going to be 100,000 pairs. It's going to take us this long to do each pair. So, we're going to budget this amount of money, and it's going to take this long. Well, of course, we all know what happened. They came in at half the time and half the budget. It's probably the only, government project that ever came in at half the time and half the budget. Well, the reason was because there were only like 24,000 pairs. And so the obvious question was, well, golly gee, what happened? Well, what happened was they found out that the DNA has all these switches, and there's a lot of hanky-panky going on up and down the DNA strand that's making a lot more than we realized, and it then launched, so that the Human Genome Project launched another entire field of study that now has a new name called epigenetics, which is the study of what makes the DNA switches, switch on, switch off, up and down that strand. What makes the genes take different partners, a partner of cancer or a partner of cancer cure, a partner of nearsightedness or whatever. And so now we have this entire new field of epigenetics. And what this should help us to realize is
be humble.
We're not nearly as smart as we think,
Exactly.
and we don't know as much as we think. And the way to bet for the future is to look back and say, okay, so how's this horse race been won? How has this horse race been run, and who have the winners been in the past? When you look back, what you find is, wow, you find complex animal-plant relationships, animal-animal relationships, but you don't see monocultures. You don't see monospecies. You don't see carbon being shipped. You see carbon being recycled in situ. Nature doesn't move carbon around. You see no waste. The waste of one thing is the feedstock for the next item in the ecosystem. And so you see these magnificent circles, and it drives me to say, okay, that's the way the race has been run for as long as we know. How do we caress that only? How do we massage it only? We don't come in like a bunch of conquistador swashbuckling pirates and say, none of those cycles matter, none of those patterns matter, we're smarter, nature's broken, and we can fix it. No, we come to this and we say, no, nature's fundamentally well. How can we simply come humbly and caress that ecological womb into a little more capacity than it had in a static state?
That's wonderful. I love how that you put that, and that to me I find very uplifting, because it says that's a worthy endeavor for a human mind. I piss off farmers because I call this modern pesticide glyphosate farming, I call it lazy farming, right? It's sort of a kill them all and let God sort it out approach, which is lazy, right? It might be sophisticated in terms of the timing of the application of pesticides and how you financially afford it and all that, but it's just lazy. And to speak back on something you said way at the beginning, which is you said that we now think that there's a link between glyphosate use and autism, right? With these astonishing autism statistics, right? And the glyphosate, that works by interrupting the shikimate pathway, which allows plants to create essential amino acids. And so you do that, you interrupt it, plants die. But the EPA said, well, no big deal. Humans don't have that pathway. But the problem is that the bacteria in our gut do have that pathway. And we now know the first glimmers that the gut and ourselves are in this symbiotic relationship, and we're feeding them and they're feeding us. And if you throw that out of balance, all kinds of things pop up that we now know about, which include things like schizophrenia, all sorts of chronic diseases, autoimmune things, you name it, right? So we're learning. Yeah. We're learning that these trillions of things in us are inhabiting, so that when you talk about that Copernican-style revolution of orthodoxy, right? I can imagine somebody from the future coming back and going, you guys, the dead zones in the Gulf of Mexico didn't tip you off? Okay. All right. So maybe you were farming wrong. But here's the deal.
That's right.
We're not these autonomous, I'm not me, this tight little container, and sometimes things come in and go out. I'm a porous vessel, and our DNA we're finding is talking. is talking with the world. That epigenetics is switching things on and off in accordance with what's happening out there. And why not? Nature's wicked smart, and it says if things change, I can adapt with that. I've created a mechanism so that this DNA can talk. So the more I learn, the more humble I get, the more I realize that the brilliance, the depth of how nature has constructed this whole thing is beyond anything I can imagine. And I have a PhD in the science, and I thought I knew stuff. I got to tell you, Joel, the older I get, the less I know. I don't know anything anymore. I know nothing.
Yeah. Well, that's now you're really becoming wise. That's exactly true. And to think that we can segregate ourselves. Those are powerful words, segregation and integration. But we, as a culture, as a extension of the Roman, Greco-Roman, Western, reductionist, linear, systematized, compartmentalized, individualized, disconnected kind of thinking, we have allowed ourselves to swallow this worldview that we can kind of levitate above nature, that this ecological umbilical can be actually severed with our technology and our creative prowess, and we can actually levitate into a segregated Star Trek future. And the truth is that we are fundamentally integrated, embedded into this ecological umbilical. We can't sever it. We couldn't if we wanted to, and we simply can't survive that way. And so we better learn how to integrate rather than segregate our lives into this. We don't get on a jet and fly 3,000 miles to go commune with nature. We are nature. Mm-hmm. and how we choose to interact with nature every day, whether it's the food we eat or the water we use or whatever it is that we do, to interact thoughtfully and with care, ultimately creates the kind of habitat, the kind of integrated eco womb that we live in and that we're going to leave as a legacy for our children. And if we're going to just leave a depraved, soiled nest, I contend that that's not a very good thing to leave,
and not worthy of our true gifts and talents. And with that, boy, I could talk with you forever. And we're out of time. I want to. Why don't you tell people about the Food Freedom Fest that's coming up? And because I think everybody should know about that.
Sure. Well, the Food Freedom Fest, this will be the second one that's been held. It'll be here in Stanton, Virginia. That's STAUNTON, August 14, 15, and 16. Coming up the 16th, there's going to be the Nutritional Therapy Association will be hosting a day as well. The 14th and 15th, the Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund, Rob Wolf of Paleo fame and founding will be here as well. But it's essentially to celebrate and actually energize the troops to contend for and defend being the freedom to choose to acquire the food of your choice from the source of your choice. And this whole orthodoxy that we've been talking about is militating right now against being able to choose for ourselves the kind of fuel we want for our own bodies. And so I kind of call this whole effort, the Food Freedom Fest, this whole food freedom effort, I kind of call it, rectifying a something that was missed in the Bill of Rights. We got the freedom the right to own a gun, the right to assemble, the right to worship, the right to speak, the right to be secure in our persons without a search warrant. There's all sorts of wonderful rights, that Bill of Rights. We did not get the right to choose our food. And so the Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund, you can Google that, and you can look this up on our website, polyfacefarms.com, for more information. But August 14, 15, 16 is going to be a good crowd, I think. And we're celebrating and empowering people to really take this orthodoxy on, as we see more and more encroachment and intrusion into personal autonomy of being able to make our own food choices.
Well, fantastic. Very well said. And Joel, thank you so much for your time. We've been talking with Joel Salatin about redemption, about healing the land, healing the food, healing the economy, and healing the culture. That's where it all goes. So, Joel, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Chris.